Charles Croucher has been appointed as chief political editor for 9 News, replacing the outgoing Chris Uhlmann, who recently announced his retirement. Croucher, who grew up in Branxton in NSW and first joined 9 News in 2010, steps into a role made famous by the legendary Laurie Oakes. "When I first arrived at Parliament House, I counted the steps between my desk and Laurie's," said Croucher. "I was so lucky to be able to watch and learn from the absolute best. It's a huge honor and challenge to follow in the footsteps of Laurie and Chris, but it'll be helped by a remarkable team of reporters and camera crews. I'm excited to now help lead a very talented team, telling some of the most important stories impacting Australians during these challenging times." Darren Wick, Director of News and Current Affairs for 9, said Croucher will cut through the spin during a crucial time of change for Australia and its place in the world. The most important reporting role at 9 is the chief political editor in Canberra. Webb built the reputation of 9 News around excellent journalism and fearless commentary from Laurie Oakes and Chris Uhlmann. "Charles Croucher is a brilliant political reporter and analyst," said Wick. "This is a new era for 9 News. We're at a turning point in history as Australia defines its place in the world and our region where alliances are rapidly changing." Charles has excelled at every challenge throughout his career at 9. He is the best person to break down the complicated language of politics and cut through the spin. Croucher joined 9 News Darwin in 2010 as sports reporter and weekend news anchor before moving to Melbourne to join A Current Affair 2 years later. He then spent 5 years in Canberra as a politics reporter for 9 News under Oakes before taking on the role of US correspondent. Croucher returned to Sydney 2 years ago and has been reporting for 9 News, as well as co-hosting Weekend Today. To mark his new position at 9, we asked Croucher a couple of questions about what politics means to him. Why does politics matter? Politics matters because it impacts almost every part of our lives. Politics done right can unite the nation to achieve things we individually couldn't dream of and improve lives. Politics done wrong can cost lives. It's hard to think of higher stakes. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing Australians over the next couple of years? Australia faces huge challenges. Externally, there's the rise and threat of China, particularly in our region. There's war in Europe and worrying economic outlooks. But the biggest challenges are domestic. Increased cost of living hurts Australians every day. If we want to keep quality of life climbing, the wages have to climb as everyone gets back on their feet after COVID. The challenge that isn't often talked about is in our society. We have to keep listening to each other. Having lived and worked in the US, I've seen what happens when people pick their sides, retreat to their corners and refuse to engage or listen with their neighbors/family/friends that don't agree. No side of politics or culture is always right. The answer so often involves compromise. We have to still be able to do it. You have spent a lot of time in the US and overseas reporting for 9 News, particularly politics. What's the one story you covered or moment you witnessed that will always stay with you? The US remains an incredible place, and to live and report on the Trump era was like few things in history. However, the one story I'll always remember was the first election I covered for 9, which was in East Timor. Timor had been through decades of violence and struggle, and the simple act of voting was a huge deal to the people. Women got dressed up and men wore suits. Pigs and chickens ran around the schools where voting took place. José Ramos Horta was president at the time, and he arrived to vote and took his place in the line. A freedom fighter and Nobel Prize winner, standing among the chickens and the pigs and the people. He lost that day, but made a point of telling me how this transfer of power meant so much to them. I wrote about it a few years ago. And finally, if there was one big historical political event you would have loved to have covered, what would it have been and why? I would have loved to cover the Hawke years. Big ideas, big characters and big reform. Covering Federation would have also been amazing. We don't give enough credit to the people that brought together 6 colonies into the functioning and thriving nation we have today, and did it all without the need for violence.